My name is Sarah Coleman, and I have something deeply personal to share with you, something that changed my life forever. Honestly, finding the right words to tell this story has been a struggle, but it's far too important to keep to myself. On April 3rd, 2023, I had an experience that completely redefined what I thought was possible. For 12 minutes, I was clinically dead. No heartbeat, no breath. But in those 12 minutes, I didn't drift into nothingness. I went somewhere so real and profound that I'm still trying to process it. What I experienced wasn't just for me, it was a message for all of us. Let me give you a bit of context. I've been an emergency room nurse for over a decade. My life has always been rooted in science, facts, and the tangible. I've seen humanity at its best and worst, moments of despair and moments of incredible resilience. If you told me even a year ago that I'd be sharing a story about dying and returning with a message from Jesus himself, I would have thought you were out of your mind. But life has a way of flipping everything you think you know upside down. That day began like any other. After a restless night following my son's soccer game, my mind racing with a million little things, I decided to take an early morning jog to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, wrapped in a calm, pre-dawn stillness. A light fog hung in the air, and it felt crisp and refreshing. I glanced at my watch. 5:12 a.m. Everything felt so ordinary, and then it happened. I don't remember the impact, but later I learned that a distracted driver, someone looking at their phone, hit me as I was crossing the street. One moment, I was alive and well. The next, everything went dark, or so I thought. What I expected was darkness, silence, an end. Instead, I found myself in a place so extraordinary, it defied explanation. The first thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't like sunlight or any artificial light we know. It was pure, warm, and alive. It didn't just illuminate my surroundings, it filled me with an indescribable sense of peace. And when I say peace, I mean the total absence of fear, pain, or worry. Everything that had ever burdened me just melted away. It felt like I had finally come home. As I stood there, trying to understand what was happening, I saw colors. Vivid, radiant colors unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Even the air seemed to hum with energy and music, a melody that resonated through me. This is just the beginning of what I experienced, and I believe it's a message meant to be shared. The music wasn't coming from a single direction. It surrounded me, flowing from everywhere at once. It wasn't like any music I'd ever heard. It was as if joy and love had been transformed into sound itself. Then I saw someone stepping toward me. It was my father. He had passed away when I was a teenager, but there he was, looking vibrant and healthy, as though he were in the prime of his life. I recognized him immediately. His smile was just as I remembered, but there was something heavenly about him. A glow, a purity I can't fully explain. "Sarah," he said, his voice overflowing with love and warmth. "You don't need to be afraid. He's waiting for you." Before I could ask what he meant, he reached out and touched my hand. In that moment, I felt a connection so deep, it was as if every question I had ever wanted to ask him was answered without a single word. It was overwhelming yet comforting all at once. "There's something you need to see," he said. Suddenly, the light around me grew even brighter, becoming more focused. And then I saw him, Jesus. I'm not exaggerating when I say that trying to describe him feels impossible. He wasn't like any image or depiction I had ever seen. His presence was both human and divine, radiating a love and power beyond anything I could comprehend. His eyes held everything, compassion, wisdom, and a depth that seemed to see not just who I was, but who I had been, and who I was meant to become. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but because being in his presence was so profoundly humbling. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle yet filled with authority. "There is something you must see, something my people need to know before I return." And then he showed me 4 events, each one more extraordinary and sobering than the last. The first event he called the Great Distraction. I saw people all over the world glued to their devices, phones, screens, and technology, completely absorbed in things that didn't matter. Families sat together but didn't speak. Friends were more concerned with social media likes than with one another. Even believers were caught up in the noise, losing sight of what truly mattered. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is how the enemy works. He keeps them distracted, focused on meaningless things, and blind to what is truly important." What I saw next was just the beginning of what he revealed to me, and the message he gave me is one I cannot keep to myself. People become so consumed by the temporary that they forget the eternal, Jesus said. Tell my people to wake up and refocus their hearts and minds on me. The second event was the Great Deception. I saw the world captivated by dazzling signs and wonders. Beautiful lights danced across the skies, and beings of extraordinary beauty and charisma began addressing humanity. They spoke of peace, unity, and enlightenment, but their words were laced with deception. Even strong believers were being drawn in, seduced by their promises. "These are not of me," Jesus warned. "They will mix truth with lies to lead many astray. Tell my people to stay rooted in my word, for it is the only foundation that cannot be shaken." The third event was the Great Awakening, and it filled me with hope. I saw waves of light spreading across the world as people turned back to God. Families were praying together, communities were alive with worship and repentance, and miracles abounded, healings, deliverances, and lives transformed in an instant. But this awakening came at a cost. Believers were mocked, attacked, and even killed for their faith. Yet, their joy remained unshakable. "My spirit will move powerfully in these days," Jesus said, "but the cost of following me will be great. Tell them to stand firm, for the reward is eternal." The fourth and final event was the Great Return. The sky split open, and there he was, coming in glory with legions of angels. The entire world stopped. Every knee bowed, and every tongue confessed that Jesus is Lord. For some, it was an act of awe and worship. For others, it was in terror. It was the most beautiful and powerful moment I have ever witnessed. "This is what awaits," Jesus said. "Tell them I am coming soon. Tell them to be ready, for no one knows the day or the hour." As the vision began to fade, I found myself still kneeling before Jesus, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I had seen. His gaze never wavered, as if all of creation could pause while he spoke directly to me. His words etched themselves into my heart. "Sarah," he said, "the world is entering a time unlike anything it has ever known," Jesus said. "You have seen what is to come, but remember this, I am always with you, and I am always with my people. My love is unchanging, and my promises are unbreakable. Even in the midst of trials and chaos, those who trust in me will find peace beyond understanding." He paused, and the light around him seemed to grow even warmer, as though his very presence could banish every fear. "There will be days of doubt, even for you. But know this, I chose you for this message, not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. Trust in my strength, not your own. And remember, this message is not yours to carry alone. My Spirit will guide you and give you the words when the time comes." Before I could respond, he placed his hand over my heart. In that instant, I felt a rush of love so deep, so overwhelming, that tears streamed down my face. "Tell my people that I see their struggles, their fears, and their failures," he said. "I am not distant from their pain. I am the God who heals, who restores, who makes all things new. They are never alone. I am always with them." As his hand lifted, the brilliance of the light began to shift, and I knew the experience was coming to an end. "Now, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with gentle urgency, "it is time for you to go back. Your work is not finished. Tell them I am coming soon." In an instant, everything changed. The vivid colors, the music, the overwhelming peace, it all seemed to collapse inward, as though being drawn through a pinhole of light. Then I felt it, a jolt, a pull, and a rush of sensation as I was brought back into my body. The first thing I noticed was the pain. My chest burned as if a fire had been reignited within me. My lungs heaved, desperately pulling in air like never before. When I opened my eyes, I saw the faces of paramedics hovering over me. Their expressions were a mixture of shock and awe, as though they couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "Relief. She's back," one of the paramedics said, their voice trembling. "We've got her back." I could barely move or speak, but the tears streaming down my face weren't from the pain. They were from the overwhelming gratitude I felt for what I had just experienced. I wanted to tell them, to tell everyone, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I gripped the hand of one of the paramedics as tightly as I could, trying to convey with that single gesture what I couldn't yet put into words. The days that followed were a whirlwind, both physically and emotionally. My recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Despite being hit by a car, my injuries were far less severe than anyone could have expected. Broken ribs, bruises, and a concussion, but no internal bleeding, no shattered bones, no spinal damage. The doctors were baffled, calling my survival and rapid healing incredible and unexplainable. But I knew the truth. As I lay in that hospital bed during those early days, I replayed everything I had seen and heard. My Father's voice, Jesus' presence, the visions of the events to come. Each moment etched itself deeper into my heart, filling me with an unshakable clarity. This wasn't just for me. I had been given a message that I had to share, no matter how difficult or unbelievable it might seem. My transition back to normal life was anything but normal. Physically, I was healing quickly, but emotionally and spiritually, I was grappling with the weight of what I had experienced. How do you explain something so profoundly otherworldly to people who might not understand? I started with those closest to me, my family, my closest friends. Some listened with awe, their eyes wide as I recounted the visions, the words of Jesus, and the overwhelming love I felt. Others looked at me with quiet skepticism, unsure if what I was saying was real or just the product of trauma and a vivid imagination. I reminded myself of what Jesus had told me. Some will doubt, some will mock, but those with ears to hear will understand and prepare. The challenge wasn't just in sharing the experience, it was in living it out. How could I return to the routines of life knowing what I now knew? Each morning I would wake up, the memories fresh in my mind, and ask myself, what can I do today to share this message? I began journaling everything in vivid detail, wanting to capture every word, every image, every feeling. I started praying like I never had before, not just for myself, but for the people I was meant to reach. I asked God to give me the strength and wisdom to speak when the time was right, to use me as an instrument for His purpose. As the days turned into weeks, opportunities began to unfold. Conversations I never would have initiated seemed to arise naturally. People, some friends, some strangers, began opening up to me about their struggles, their doubts, their fears. In those moments, I found the courage to share small pieces of my story, always mindful of Jesus' words. The message is not yours to carry alone. My Spirit will guide you and give you the words when the time comes. The reactions were mixed, but something beautiful started happening. Even those who doubted seemed to pause and reflect. Seeds were being planted, and I realized that my role wasn't to convince anyone. It was to simply share what I had seen and trust God with the rest. As my physical strength returned, so did my resolve. I started speaking to small groups, at church gatherings, with friends over coffee, and even with medical colleagues who were curious about my recovery. Each time I shared my experience, I felt a deeper connection to the message and to the people I was speaking to. But it wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of doubt when I questioned my own sanity. What if they're right? What if it wasn't real? In those moments, I would close my eyes and remember the light, the warmth of Jesus' presence, and the love that had filled every fiber of my being. This is real, I would remind myself. This is your purpose. I also faced ridicule. Some people dismissed my story outright, calling it a hallucination or a near-death delusion. Others questioned my motives, suggesting I was looking for attention or trying to fabricate something sensational. Those moments stung, but they also deepened my reliance on God. Each time I faced doubt or criticism, I would recall the words Jesus spoke to me. Trust in my strength, not your own. Over time, I realized that my story wasn't just about the extraordinary experience I had. It was about the everyday choices I made to live out the message I had been given. It was about encouraging others to turn their hearts back to God, to refocus on what truly matters, and to prepare for what is to come. This journey has taught me that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting in the one who does. It's about standing firm in the face of doubt and persecution, knowing that his promises are unbreakable. Every day, I wake up with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that I am a small part of something far greater than myself. And every time I share this story, I pray that it reaches the hearts of those who need to hear it, just as Jesus intended. The work isn't easy, and there are still moments of doubt and fear, but I hold on to the words he spoke to me. You are never alone. I am always with you.